Testing.
Today is Monday, March 11th, 2024, and we will call the meeting to order at 5:31 p.m. and we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. We will begin school committee member introductions with Counselor Harriman.
Scott Harriman, City Council Representative to the School Committee.
Donna Gallant, Ward 7.
Megan Hurd, Ward 6.
Ashley Medina, Ward 5.
Craig Charpentier, Ward 4.
Elizabeth Eames, Ward 3.
Janet Bowden, Ward 2.
Phoenix McLaughlin, Ward 1.
Megan Parks at large.
Jake Langley, Superintendent.
Karen Puckhead, Assistant Superintendent.
Thank you. The consent agenda, are there any items on the consent agenda that members would like set aside? Seeing none, the consent agenda is adopted. Agenda item number 4 is to receive and potentially vote on the 6th grade end of school year field trip for Boston, Mass. And it looks like Miss Miles will be presenting.
Yep, there you go.
Okay. This year we're going to the Boston Museum of Science. And while there, we're going to do the planetarium, the IMAX theater, and the kids are getting lunch as well. On the agenda, there are 6 things the kids will be able to choose from for lunches. And we are leaving, the kids arrive about 6:30 in the morning. We're boarding the buses at 6:45, hopefully pulling out by 7, hopefully getting down to Boston by 9:30. Doing everything is inside the Science Museum. And then about 4 o'clock, board the buses to come home. So off the bus, into the museum, back onto the bus and home.
Any questions or comments? Member Bowden?
Thanks. I remember my daughter doing this at McMahon in 6th grade, and still one of my favorite memories from the end of elementary school. So I love the opportunity for our kids, and I will gladly support this. Are you commenting or motioning? You're commenting. Okay, so I'll wait.
Our chaperone ratio is about 4-1. We have about 80 kids and we take 20 chaperones, combination of parents and teachers. And so it's a really good ratio to keep track of everybody.
Is it, are you the only school or is it a whole day devoted to schools?
At the museum?
Yes.
We just booked it for May 17th is our date that we're going.
Right.
I don't
So it's not
know.
one of those days
Yeah.
where everyone in the state is there.
Yeah,
Maybe, okay.
we are getting the students bright green, neon green T-shirts.
Mhm.
So we'll be able to spot our
No, yeah, that's
kids.
great. I'm not, it wasn't a worry. I was just curious.
Yes.
And I remember my kids sleeping over there in the sixth grade, but that was a long time ago. So,
I did.
yeah. That was a highlight for sure. But so great. Thank you so much for doing it.
Member Hurd?
Thank you. I'd like to make a motion to approve the field trip to the Boston Museum of Science.
Thank you.
I'll second it.
Thank you. Any further comments or questions? All in favor? It is unanimous. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Agenda item number 5 is to review and potentially vote on the second read of the following policies. EBCE, the second one listed is going back to the subcommittee for further review, so we'll only be voting on A for tonight. Member Hurd?
So I just have a question about field trips, just a clarifying question. So we usually don't see field trip requests for elementary age students. Is that because this is out of state that we require them? Because usually when they go to like the apple orchard or the ocean or the whatever, like we don't have to approve those.
Yeah, typically if it's non-local, overnight, water, those kinds of criteria, we bring them back.
Are there any questions on EBCE, school cancellation policy? This is the second read, so this will make it official. Nothing has changed. Is there a motion? Member Bowden?
Yep, I'll make a motion to approve the second read of policy EBCE.
Is there a second? Seconded by,
I'll second it.
thank you. Any further discussion? All in favor? And opposed? It is 8-1. Passes 8-1, sorry. Agenda item number 6 is the budget workshop.
So we are continuing with our walkthrough. Again, we use the slides to help us. We have a few guests tonight that are going to help facilitate a few different conversations from their leadership perspectives. So tonight we have articles 2, 6, 8, 9, and 10. And then on Wednesday, we'll finish up and we'll look at some review time for questions that you may have, but also looking to bring you some potential reductions that we've been working hard on in the office. I do want to give some airtime to the state is working on a number of items that I think are discussion worthy, at least to get them on the table so that we can continue to monitor them. Member Eames has been following those as well. And would you mind just kind of walking through the messaging that you shared with the committee? I think it's important for public to hear the more than a handful of things that are going on at the state level that could result in changes to us, including fiscal changes.
Okay, well, I sent you a full page, single-spaced email, but I'll try and summarize it quickly. So at the Region 6 meeting that also had the York, I forget what number it is, the York region on it, we learned some things. We learned that LD 974, which concerns the minimum salaries for ed techs and support staff, which well, as of that night, it had been recommended for passage, but we don't know I don't know what the legislature has done in the meantime. Maybe something's happened. LD 345, which increases access to developmental services, CDS, for young ones, 3- and 4-year-olds with disabilities, did pass out of committee and with full support, and it's likely to pass. so I'll mention this. Maine was the only state that did it this way, and so Maine will now, assuming this passes, will be conforming to all the other states in the country. Apparently the money has always been there. It's just shifting the money around. So this will be less of a financial challenge than we at first thought. I mean, it will still be a challenge, but it will be less of a challenge than we first thought, which was a panic. And it has to be done by 2028. So not quite yet. Can be done earlier, but yeah. Is that the kind of thing you want me to say?
Yeah, that's perfect. I just want to add context. The CDS language for us anyway here in Lewiston is really heavy on space if we have to house anything, including supports, and heavy on the resources.
Sure.
So the state
Staffing.
has struggled to staff some of the CDS supports. And so that's led to some breakdowns in the supports that should be provided. While there's resources, we're going to be asked we'll be given financial resources to provide a service at some point in time. We also don't have those staff. And so it does move a burden onto us locally. It will also add to our overall enrollments for students that we have primary care responsibility for.
Sorry, in my attempt to summarize,
No,
I left that out. Yes, the spacing and the staffing will be a challenge. Maybe the financing is slightly less, but we're still panicked. Okay. LD 1064 is probably going to move teacher salaries up to 50K as a minimum. LD 1152 requires long-term disability, and I forgot to get the answer to this. Do we already have that?
So
I think we do.
We offer it as something people can
Yes.
choose. to pay
Okay,
for.
yes, so it might not affect us so much. And the paid family and medical leave has passed into law, so now we have to accommodate it, and that's, I gather from what we've been discussing, for us, it's going to be 1% of the salaries will be set aside for an insurance pool for the all state workers. So other issues we learned were that some of the southern cities, I won't name them, are going for about a 10% budget increase. And so that's just something to bear in mind. One of them was going for 5, but most of them were in the 10 to 11% range. And others had not gotten far enough along to say. Some others, so
I'm sorry, is there a reason why they're going so high?
I don't know the answer about
Okay.
why. I think basically inflation.
Okay.
Subsidies were down for other schools. They were very bitter about the subsidies being so low for them. And they thought it was because they had much fewer students. We don't have this problem. We've got plenty of students, overabundance of students. Subsidy catches up, but not immediately, I guess. They had a lot of homeschooling that's gone up rather than down, which I don't think we have that issue so much. Maybe we do. Okay, I'm gonna, out of the corner of my eye, I gather that yes, we have more homeschooling, but we're not short on people. Like, we have plenty of kids. Yeah, and again, the states, I don't know what the difference between the cities and the states valuation, but several of the southern coastal communities were upset that the state's valuation was affecting their subsidies. So maybe you can explain that, because I don't understand it.
Yeah, so the valuation is what drives that local minimum share number. And so if you take a community like a Kittery, which I think you shared some about,
Yeah.
they have a lot of coastal homes that produce massive amounts of tax revenue,
Yeah,
but they don't use a lot of the services because they're either not there or they don't have students in schools, things of
Yeah,
that nature.
right.
So the assessed value drives the local minimum share number, which also matches, it pairs out to the 100% funding for schools. And so if your local minimum share is really high, your state subsidy is really low.
so that's what they were complaining about. Okay, so why we were paired, I don't know, because the York people and us are very different. But anyway, we were on the same call. And the question about bathrooms, I guess that's a statewide problem. It's not just us. And they were saying that maybe the revolving renovations funding could be tapped for that, but it would be a long-term prospect. But don't forget that might be available for us. And then, yeah, and then they encouraged us to do self-evaluations. Yes. All right, thank you. That's all. No, school board should evaluate themselves, not just the superintendent. And it should be done once a year. And we need to do that.
So that update was heavy on budget-related items, so it made sense to share in this space. We do have projections on some of these that if it became law, how might it apply to us? We don't have exact numbers offhand because they're still making the rules and deciding what things could play out of it. All right, so I'm going to jump to a screen sharing. Yeah.
Do we have any of these in our books? The ones that you're going to be doing?
Yeah, all of these articles are already in the binder.
Okay.
With the respective summaries. And so we'll walk through where these things are. There's also a handful of handouts tonight.
Yes.
So you have a few pages there. I think it's 4 pages of definitions for the binder that might be helpful as a reference. You should also have an updated version of the Montello school report, which I had missed. And then there's another handout which we'll talk about with the special education presentation. I think that was it for handouts tonight. I also shared with you the slideshows electronically, should you want to look at those. Just as a note, sometimes those change and move, but I just wanted you to have it as a reference. And we'll go from there. So tonight we're going to start with Article 2, which is special education. Director Crafts will come up and she's prepared some slides for you. But I also want to just put out some reminders of things that we've already talked about. Our commitment to improving special education so that we can keep our kids home is not only beneficial and I think the right thing to do wherever we can, but also is cost effective as long as we can find the space and the staff to support them. So much of what Director Crafts will share is around that same line of thinking. And we also want to get kind of nitty gritty with the special purpose private school costs and explain the main care seed piece so that we have a full understanding of what the ask of us here locally is. I also want to put in a bit of a plug for Director Crafts. You're doing a great job, you and your team, working really hard to do a lot with a little, but also to make a note that we are actively seeking answers from various decision makers beyond Lewiston to try to articulate or get others to articulate why, with such an effort to put a cap on certain things, have they grown in the millions. And for a community like ours to have a multi-million-dollar increase in special purpose private schools and seed costs, it chews up most of our additional subsidy before we've done anything. And so without further ado, we'll walk through the slides and then we'll share.
Thank you. All right. Hi again. So I basically have put together a PowerPoint that will just go through each school, what we have in-house, our specialized programs, not necessarily what we're doing in the resource room or co-teaching or anything like that, but we'll get into the nitty-gritty of what we're doing in-house, how we're trying to make it work, and then explore the special purpose private school numbers and the increases. So. There we go. This is just a basic overview of the entire department from the leadership perspective. There's myself. I have 2 assistant directors, Anna Matthew and Michelle Winslow. You'll see under Anna, she has Jess Marr, who is the outplacement coordinator. She is the one that is in charge of 133 students that are outplaced and is like their case manager, does their IEPs, runs all of their meetings. Anna also oversees all of our service providers. We have clinicians, we have speech and language clinicians, we have OTs, PTs, BCBAs, whole gamut of stuff. She also oversees the high school, and then under that falls next step as well.
Michelle has our special programs, RISE, day treatment. So there's Kelly Dempsey, she is the DT administrator. We have Cassidy Delcourt is the intervention coordinator. So she works closely with Next Step, oversees Rooted for special ed and regular ed, tracks our DOJ data and abides by that law. And her and I sort of do that piece with Karen when we have our regular meetings with the DOJ. Then we have Katie Colasante, who oversees all of our RISE FLS programming and now is also involved in our day treatment. Like I mentioned the other night, we're trying to work together more closely so that we can serve more kids and not have such a strain on the entire department across the district in 8 buildings. And she also oversees the K-8 APs in the buildings as well for supervision for special ed. So our services, we have, I'm going to go through from the least restrictive to the most restrictive. So least restrictive would be meaning you're the least amount of time that you can be in a special education classroom. You'd have a consultation level of service. This is like a special ed teacher checking in with you, monitoring your plan, and tries to monitor what, are we going to get out of special ed? Do we need more special ed? It's just a very minimum level of service. We have co-teaching. I talked about that the other night in certain buildings across the district. Resource room is a level of service that we either pull the kids out and service them in a special education classroom, depending on what their disability is in, if it's reading, writing, math, it's individualized, or we do it in the mainstream as well, sometimes through co-teaching or just in small group in the mainstream classroom. That's always the goal, to have them in the mainstream as much as possible. We have a self-contained behavior program. That's like a lighter day treatment. That's the goal, is to try them there first. And if they don't make it, then we go to day treatment. So day treatment we have at McMahon, the middle school, and the high school. Also have RISE FLS separate, and then RISE. And I sort of went over that the other night, but RISE would be your ABA programming. Primarily autism and other related disabilities. FLS focuses more on functional life skills, daily living skills. And sometimes we find that those disabilities are together, and that's where we service together. So our self-contained RISE FLS, and RISE, currently we're serving 190 students in district. That's on top of our 133 kids that we're serving at outplaced schools. A lot of them are similar. Some of them are more significant that need to be like outside of the district. But what I talked about the other night was trying to do more in district to cut down on those costs. So we're already doing a really good job, I feel like, by servicing 190 in-house. And that's always a goal. We're always trying to add more. LPS, we have a wait list. We have 27 kids that it's already been decided at the IEP team table that they're going to go to a special purpose private school. So once a spot becomes available, because there's wait lists, they end up doing tours, and then they end up entering into the special purpose private school. 34 students are on the radar for a more restrictive environment. That might be RISE FLS, day treatment in-house. It could be a special purpose private school if they get to the point where they no longer can make it in their gen ed setting. So we try to do everything we can to maintain them, because we have to keep them in-house until those things are ready. Last week, I stated that we had 73 active CDS kids starting kindergarten. The number's now up to 80 as of today, so that continues to grow. And then 51 are in child find. So a lot of them will probably end up starting their IEP and will enter kindergarten with an IEP needing something more. That's a much larger number than we've had in the past. So Connors Elementary School, we have 154 special education students there right now. We have a RISE and FLS classroom. We have multiple classrooms, I think 4, or room for 4. We have a self-contained behavior classroom. There are no students entered in that right now because there are no teachers. But we do have those classrooms in those spaces available. We are asking for Connors next year to add a resource room teacher and additional BHPs and one-to-ones, 5 of them. We've had multiple students this year move in district that need that level of service. It was already on the IEP, so we had to ask for unbudgeted positions or had to pull one-to-ones and ed techs from other buildings to cover those kids with those needs. Asking for a social worker or a social work clinician for, to deal with a lot of the students that have entered have some trauma that they need to deal with. So we do need to add in some social work services there to take care of that or to help address that so they can be successful in school. Also looking to add a speech and language clinician, again, because of the transfers and referrals that have come to that elementary school. Farwell, 90 students.
Just
We
a
have,
quick question, sorry. For what you were showing there, when it said 0 out of 2 teachers or 2 out of 5 teachers, does that mean budgeted teachers that are not filled, or is that part of the
Yes.
request? Okay, thank you.
we've had several teachers leave throughout the year. So, I mean, they were filled at some point and then it's been sort of back and forth there. Farwell, 90 total special education students. We have a RISE and FLS classroom there, fully staffed, full-time behavior specialists there. And we're requesting a district-wide occupational therapist. So part of their duty would be to go and help at Farwell because our current OT that is there is stretched thin.
When we talk about these specialized services, that's also part of that billing component that we've talked about. So we want to provide the service because we should, but also if the services are provided, we can then bill back main care for them.
Yes.
And that says there's 34 out of 39 students, so there's 5 potential spots there, but you don't have kids on the wait list that fit that need.
According to state law, like what we can add in is, you know, like the number's 39, but sometimes we have really, really hard kids and it's not appropriate. We watch like the safety levels to make sure that it's safe enough to let them in. We are entering 2 students, I believe, very soon there, but it's trying to make it so it's appropriate for the staff and the students. It's all about timing. All right, Geiger. So Geiger has RISE classroom and they have a group learner classroom, which group learner is an ABA classroom that also works on life skills, but it's more, I think they explained this the other night, but it's working together in group settings, not individualized ABA, so that they can, you know, the goal is to be into the mainstream. They also have a self-contained behavior classroom. I think Principal Gish talked about this last week. That's new this year. They are fully staffed right now and we're looking to enter some more students in there. There are no requests for anything at Geiger currently right now in the budget. McMahon, 143 total students, which is a pretty high number because we do have day treatment there and they have a lot of other special education kiddos that are enrolled there. We have a day treatment wing. We have K-6. And then we also have a self-contained behavior classroom. And our budget requests there are to also share the district-wide OT and an additional social worker and clinician for not day treatment because they have clinicians tied to their classrooms. That's how they have to, it goes hand in hand. But for the other students that are in the building, the new students that have enrolled, we believe that a social worker or clinician is needed there to support their needs. LMS, 124 total students right now. We have day treatment. It's going well there this year. We also have RISE and FLS. Next year, we have a ton of 6th graders rising into 7th grade. So we're going to need to add an additional day treatment teacher and a RISE and FLS teacher. The numbers are just high in the 6th grade. So in order to accommodate that so they can stay in-house, we need to add those additional teachers. For those of you that are new, when I first started, there was no day treatment in the middle school. So there was day treatment K-6 and then 9 through 12. And I added the 7 and 8 grade span. So we need to make up for that and add an additional teacher in order to service all of our students. We are also requesting social work clinicians. We need 2, 1 in order to support the day treatment kiddos in 7th and 8th grade with the additional teacher, we need a clinician. And then to accommodate the other high numbers of students coming up from 6th to 7th grade, we need to add an additional social worker. Also looking to add a speech and language clinician. It would be split between LMS and LHS. Currently, we're using a lot of presence learning, which is online speech. It's not always in the best interest of the students to do it online. So if we can try to hire in person, we would prefer to do that. Oh,
Just have a question about if there's a bubble in the sixth grade, will that mean a slight reduction next year in the sixth grade? Or no, that we couldn't hope.
We'll
We-
just
we can
fill
only
those.
hope for that. Okay.
yeah, typically we can, we'll just add from the waiting list of students. It's just, we're constantly every week meeting, looking at the numbers, finding out where we can put the students in the vacancies. So based on the need. LHS, 198 total students as of today, down 2 from last week. Day treatment, it's going very well there this year. 15 out of 22 students. We're looking to add another clinician so we can add more. Clinicians goes hand in hand, like I've said, with the teacher. And so in order to fully serve the 22 students, we feel that we need to add an additional clinician in there. Rise in FLS is going very well at the high school, in my opinion. We've expanded. We have an FLS, fully functional life skills program. 2 different classrooms, a lower functioning and a higher functioning. And we also have a Rise classroom that mainstreams a lot. And they have ABA programming in the mainstream with ed tech support. Sometimes they double up on ed techs and they go out into the mainstream and they take classes. So our requests there, oh, sorry. Did I already go over them? I probably did, but adding somebody, a day treatment counselor, and then a special education, regular social worker. So we have high numbers at the high school that need social work on there from their IEPs. So we're looking to add somebody there. And again, like I mentioned with LMS, we'd split the clinician between LMS and LHS between the 2 buildings if we could hire in person. So outplacement. So our special purpose private schools, I think Jake handed out this paper for you. These are all of the schools that we send kids to and what their daily rate, tuition rate, not daily, yearly tuition rates are, and the cost. So I had added in the budget an outplacement coordinator because my current one has 133. Last year she had 108. I mentioned last week there was a change in the Chapter 33 law where there are more Chapter 33 IEP meetings that need to happen. And a lot of the students that are outplaced have a high number of meetings anyways, just because if you're looking to transition back to the high school or to the elementary schools or wherever, that's always the goal. You have to have meetings constantly to like 20-day reviews to go over the programming, make sure that the transition back. And sometimes it's the opposite way. They enter and then you have to have a meeting after they start. So there's just a lot more meetings than there would be in the typical buildings here. So she's pretty booked all the time, just doing meeting after meeting after meeting. She also needs to do all the written notices and a lot of the paperwork management. So although we pay for outplacement schools, we're responsible for the IEPs here. So, yes.
So I want to take a second to look at this document that Kirsten put together. Is very helpful. So the very top section is just a comparison from last year to this year as it relates to the tuition costs. But I want to really emphasize, highlighted in yellow, that $847,000 increase, that's year to date. That is not for the year. That is to date. It's only March, and we've only been billed through February. So you can see how that trend is going with months of school left. At the bottom, or the next section down, you can see the main care seed 23-24 comparison. And we want to talk more about main care seed because it's one of those things that is tricky to understand. We talk about main care billing here, so that when we provide certain services, we can be reimbursed by the state for some of those things. What happens when you send a student to a special purpose private school is they do billing also. And 62% of that is federal. So the federal government pays that portion. The other 32% gets submitted to main care at the state, otherwise known as main care seed. State of Maine passes that responsibility on to the district. So when we talk about main care seed, it's 32% of the reimbursable cost for any qualifying student going to an outplacement. It's a massive number. It is growing. And it's it's not sustainable. So we have asked for these meetings and these conversations with legislators, with other organizations, and obviously those who represent us here locally at other levels. We pay the tuition, and then we pay the reimbursement 32%. And it's still hard for me to follow. These are our students, so we do receive subsidy for them. So I think that's the dotted line connection of, well, we give you subsidy for that student, so you're responsible for that 32%. But we also pay the tuition, which far exceeds what we get in subsidy for that particular student. These numbers do not include transportation. They do not include other oversight and staffing of things like who's coordinating the transportation day to day. If we have incidents or other things on the transportation, that's other members of the team managing those situations. There's a lot of kind of hard to quantify costs, and there's also some very easy to quantify costs, which Alyssa will share later when she comes up to talk. But if you look at the very bottom of the main care seed comparison, you can see that the projected full year, very bottom right, is over $2 million in seed funds.
At Section 28 this year went, so there's Section 65, Section 28, that's billable. Section 65 is under day treatment. And you have to have a clinician tied to the program. Section 28 is for like our ABA programming, Margaret Murphy. So basically the Section 28 costs have gone up. They're now 40, I think by 45% or something like that. They're up to 45%. So that's why you see a huge increase there. For a certain school has gone up $1.1 million just for our seed cost alone. So that's a tough one.
Yeah, if you go way down to the bottom of page 2, you can see that the projected shortfall is over 1.3 million. And for those of you who were here last year, we built a contingency fund, a reserve for $1 million using fund balance, just to try to help mitigate some of these situations. We're going to try to not use it if we can use like unfilled teacher positions and things like that to conquer some of these costs. But you can see how it's not sustainable. Last year, oh, don't quote me, I think we added $2 million into related outplacement costs just in our budget, plus the $1 million reserve. And you can see that we are already operating in excess of that because of the costs that, again, we have no control over. So what happens is we get a letter in the mail. I have pictures on my computer because I couldn't believe it. We get a letter in the mail from the provider saying, by the way, in January, your rate's going to go from this to up 12, 15, 20% to this. Daily cost per child.
So I don't ever think you come to us with asks unless it's like for real that we really need it. I mean, some of the other members don't remember before you kind of came to us and said, we need these AP positions, but I'm actually going to give you back like 60 positions. So, I mean, you never really come to us with things that you need unless you really do need them. So seeing those asks on there, I know that it's something that you need, that like our district really needs. But do you know, like, how many open positions do you have right now? And do you think you'll be able to fill the positions that you're asking for?
No, I
I think Jake and I debate over this,
we
so we'll see
do
what he
debate over
says first.
So yeah, I'll chime in first. She already knows what I'm going to say, so it's no surprise. But as I've said to the committee already prior, I've asked Kirsten to bring to this committee to put in this budget, what should we be doing this year? Knowing that we're trying to transition to a place where we are sending less kids away at a far greater cost. So if we kept kids in-house, we don't pay that seed money at all. We don't have to pay that tuition. We don't have to pay that transportation and all of the oversight to coordinate it. But it's also how much can you take on while you're still paying that tuition bill? And so the conversations that we have is around, I know these things are needed, but I also know that we struggle to hire clinicians. So I'm going to take the position with pushback, but respectful, that we can't put 10 clinicians in the budget. We need them. We could benefit from them if we provided that service. We could get reimbursement for a number of services that they provide. However, there are not 10 clinicians out there ready to take those jobs. And so what I'm trying to do with a a sense of intuition, knowing the labor market, knowing our hiring challenges, what's responsible to put in the budget to try to provide as much service as we can while knowing we still have to pay tuition and outplacement. And also knowing that we can put 10 in the budget and their associated costs and ask for that. But we won't be able to, in my opinion, we will not be able to hire those 10 positions. So I don't think it's responsible to ask taxpayers for those dollars. But there's also a threshold of what we have to provide legally. The difference between special education and some of the other areas, say like supplies, we could just tell schools you have less supplies and they have to go figure it out. If we tell our families and our students and their related IEPs that we don't have the resources to provide that, they can go elsewhere or can request to be elsewhere to get it, and we're still responsible for that cost. So the challenge for us is that our wants, we want to keep our kids home, but there's also the legal obligation of if we don't do things to keep more kids here, we will have higher cost to provide the care that they're supposed to have. And so it's really hard for me to have both those lanes happening down the highway at the same time, with no great exit ramps, and escalating costs. That is just not sustainable. So long answer to your question is we do have positions posted that I think we could hire at times, and we need to keep them posted because I'd like to be able to provide those services in-house. But I'm also looking at a reality of what will actually land in the budget versus what Director Kraft has said, this is what we need, and I trust her on that. Because we won't fill them. It's just a bit of a reality, unfortunately. But the budget you have, these positions are in it currently.
Member Gallant.
Yeah, I'm looking at the percentage of increase. I mean, 116% increase. How is that? How does anyone, substantiate that? I mean, that's an 100%. I mean, they're like, I can understand increase, but at that percentage, I mean, insurances aren't going up that much. I don't believe any other consumer needs are going up that. And I think this has to be really investigated. I think we ought to have, from these companies or these places, we ought to have something from them, like a bill of sales of what constitutes, this amount of money going to you. We want to know on paper.
And it gets even better. So I think Kirsten's going to touch on some of the other pieces of this slide with services that are provided and or not.
I want to add to that because you were not here last year. So last year right after I think the budget sort of had settled, we got a notice that they were going to, so in the past, we were only charged for when students would attend the special purpose private schools. A lot of our students at certain schools won't always attend. So I would balance the budget because we were not paying for every single day. So we came back here and made everybody aware that this new rule might come into place, not knowing that on top of that there would be increase in seed and the increase in all the tuition. So it's like we don't have that buffer anymore because we're paying 100% no matter what, plus all of the other stuff. So what he's talking about that I would share is that they're also facing staff crises like we are. So I have certain special purpose private schools that can't staff speech people and they can't staff PTs. And because the SAU is responsible for the IEP, I have to try to find providers to go there from our district to service the kids there that we're paying for to go there. So it's challenging.
So you're telling me we're paying for that student's tuition and also paying for our own staff to go to that school to teach. So they're like double dipping, kind of, is like we're double paying.
It could be triple if you want to look at it a certain way, but in some instances, because the service can't be provided, but it must be provided, it's on us. So yes.
This is, I mean, I'm just mind boggled by this. Can we get like a a item listed as to the cost? I mean, do we know what we're paying for?
We're working on it.
Yeah, we are working on that, but a lot of it comes down to, it's kind of underwhelming, the notices that we get, and it's just per student per day fee. And it's just their tuition. And so it doesn't break down, well, we're going to provide this, we're going to provide that. It just says for that student to come here, it's this much per student per day.
You know, I don't know, but I just feel like it's price gouging. I'm gonna go ahead and say it.
I would agree with you. And this is why we've mentioned this to, not just mentioned, but formally wrote to all of our representation, decision makers, Department of Ed, you name it, and said this has to be looked at. And so we actually have something coming up here very soon to put it all on the table, kind of like we did here, so people can see it. Because when you say, you know, Lewiston's going to get a little over $3 million more in subsidy, and you have a projected full year increase for this year, not counting next year, and I assure you that they will try to go up, of over $2 million, it's not much to work with.
Member McLaughlin?
Thanks. Yeah, a couple questions for either of you. One, you mentioned, you know, you're worried about this prospect of needing to budget for positions while we're still paying for the tuition. So I was curious, what is the speed of that ramp up and ramp down? I mean, would it be this over the course of multiple years or a couple months? What do you think that would be?
Yeah, I think the ramp up is years. And I think that's for a couple of reasons. And the school committee's been very supportive over the last several years, since Director Crafts came on, when she was able to share a plan that had some vision to it around how do we transition and make sure we're providing better service to our kids. Because at the time we weren't even fulfilling a number of services. So it's gone a lot better. So that part of that transition plan has been already happening for multiple years. But if we said from today, how long would it take to say have another, well, let's pick a number, 70 kids have services in Lewiston? If we can post these positions and get people on board, appropriate the space, I think you're looking at a 2 to 3 year window to close that gap. Space is something that we might have a little room with now to try some things, but not enough room. But I still think the larger context is really, how do you drive down both those lanes, pay that massive tuition cost and try to attract staff and get them trained to support the students? It's just hard to do both. So it's a multi-year approach for sure. All the while, again, we are having a lot more kids stay in district. The number seems big, but the level of need also is growing. My concern around the special purpose private school piece and connecting some dots for down the road, the model is not too dissimilar for CDS. When we can't provide the services, we will have to contract with people that do, and they will set their rates. We will not be able to set those rates.
My other question related to that is, what of the positions that were mentioned, you know, clinicians versus teachers versus others, what of those might form the bottleneck and what of those are required as part of the IEP? Like, is a social worker just as required to provide that service as a teacher?
They're all required.
Okay.
It depends on the individualized student need. I think, this is my opinion, not Jake's, this is where we differ a little bit. I feel like I want to take care of my staff. I worry about them all the time. I have the best administration under me running in the schools, and I worry about them because they are tapped out all the time. We're all tapped out. We're always like piecemealing things because we're short in certain areas. So I would like to try to combine together more, because I feel like if we work together in certain spaces, that may be stronger, because the more happy your staff are, the more they're likely to stay because they believe in something. So I would like to do that together. And then I think that we could actually cut down on some of the clinicians and share the speech, so we're not spread out against 8 buildings. But again, that's another big, like, it would have to be well thought out, and it's, you know, a plan. The thing is with the speech and the OTs and PTs, if it's on the IEP, then we're contracting out. So that's going to be like $150 an hour for somebody to do this, and they're not easy to find. So it's just like, it's like this juggling act every single day. And then you think you're doing good, and then the ball drops again. So it's like, can be hard.
Thank you.
Yes.
Sorry, Member Heard.
So I think it also needs to be said too for new members and also the general public, that you came to us with kind of like a crazy idea. Was it last year? You wanted your APs? Was it last year or 2 years ago? 2 years ago. And we were like, there's this thing and it's not really wide known, but we're going to try it and we think it's going to work really well. And I think as a district, we are seeing that it is working really well. So I don't think your ideas are crazy. And I think you have really good ideas clearly because they're working. So I think that needs to be said too, because I think there is a big ask there, but you obviously know what you're doing. Like you've been in it for a really long time. I mean, you've been in the trenches. So when you come to us, again, like I said, when you come to us to ask for something, me personally, I feel like it's something you really need and something that you really believe in and something that you feel is the best option for not only our students, but for our district. So thanks. Thank you for that.
Yeah, her ideas are not crazy. They're not, and I don't think that at all. And I think we appreciate each other's perspective. And we do talk a lot about different ideas. Some of the ideas that Director Kraft mentioned, I think are feasible. I don't know if they have to be a big budget conversation, but it's a decision-making tree of, do we want to grab up a wing or half a wing at a school that's under enrolled currently and try this? And if we can find the staff and do it, I think that we should try to problem solve that. There's other logistical challenges, but again, I think those are all feasible. If we can build capacity to do that, you go from like McMahon right now having 34 students when it's, according to, the physical space, they could have 54. Again, they have some more challenging students. They're still getting some staff up to speed. So there's reasons it's not at 54. But if we put, as Director Kraft said, enough resource to that space, it could be 54. 20 more kids being served in-house is $1 million. I mean, it just is. And so it's a conversation that if she could hire all of the staff that she just mentioned, we would save all kinds of money. And it would be better for kids. We still need the space. And again, my reality when I look in the mirror before I ask taxpayers for $7 million in increase, those positions we're not able to fill them. I actually floated a pooling idea to Adam when we talked about the budget and how could we figure this out, was to take the approach of, budget what we have, what we know we need to an extent, and have some kind of stop point on it and say, instead of saying this dollar is for that thing and this dollar is for that thing, let Kirsten know what she has access to for funds to try to find the people to fulfill that full cycle of, okay, so give me one clinician, give me one OT, give me one PT, give me 2 teachers, 4 ed techs, and I'll fill that wing. That might be a direction we want to consider. And I think we're going to try to do that in this budget while maintaining some positions. I'm hoping no other administrators are listening, but the special ed budget is especially fluid as it relates to how they move positions from which lines because of the level of need. You have no idea that this kid's going to show up tomorrow and need a 1-to-1. And so we have an unfilled teacher position, we split it, we move it, it's all allocated, it's all got a paper trail, but we split it and move it and allocate it so that we can hire that 1-to-1 to provide the services for that student. So special ed is more fluid than anywhere else. Adam had shared that he thought we could keep the positions, and once we find a number, we can navigate it behind the scenes, moving things around. So that's kind of my pitch, is we budget growth and we try to fill the positions that we can to provide the services to keep kids in-house.
Can I add something to that? So I think you need to keep in mind too, that we're competing with the special purpose private schools who pay a lot more than us.
So I don't know if this has ever been done, but so in that same realm, would it be a possibility for districts to share positions? So like share OT, PT, like that kind of thing. So like say Auburn, you and Auburn could come together and then you're offering collectively a higher rate of pay, more benefits or whatever. I don't want to really say to like pull these people from the special private schools, but you're giving an opportunity to like offer more benefits or whatever, and then you kind of share them as like with other districts.
So yes, it is possible. We have some factors we have to figure out, collective bargaining agreements, but there are some areas of Maine that function with their region as the point person to provide some of the services. We're actually exploring that for CDS. Because you'll have some levels of need, but you may not need a full-time person 5 days a week. So we're already exploring that from that perspective. But to your question, yes, it is feasible to do that. There's some logistics, but it's feasible.
So if you notice on the slide, it says the overall special purpose private school tuition rates have increased by 25% this year alone. So that's a 25% increase, and overall seed costs 42%. This is an estimate. I need to give credit to my administrative assistant, Lynn, because she created this. And she is always monitoring it and telling me, so these are the projected rates at this time. They could be higher. So just want to be transparent with that. And I put note, this does not include transportation costs. So that's under Alyssa's budget, and it does not include those related services I talked about that I need to send over to them when they're short, or the evaluations that we do. So we pay for our psych evals, all of that for the most part. So there is other additional costs that are quite high.
And chapter 33s and annual meetings and other assessments and the effort to try to get students back to our district.
Right.
So that we're not paying that cost.
And there's
which we
also
have some-
strain. I put the two at the bottom, like we need like more administrative assistant help in the office with that, because there is extra CDS kids, there's extra outplacements. Like, it's just, you can only ask your people to do so much, and you watch them, they're stressed every day. So, yes.
Thanks. Just as a part of the conversation that you have with the state, when you present all of this, is it possible that they put a cap on these special schools, as to what they're allowed to charge us, just for consistency purposes? Are they allowed to do that? This just seems completely out of control.
So, yes, I asked that question and I was told that it's actually formulaic. So there's a cap that was established in last year's law, but it was supposed to be something that would help be a consistent cost or revenue stream for providers so that they could budget effectively. And it was supposed to also potentially have that bump initially for those of us who were here last year. That's why we did the reserve, initial bump, and then kind of plane out. And so we'd have more cost, but it'd be more of a sustainable model. It did not do that because it's formulaic and there's like level of need, overhead cost. There's all kinds of pieces of formula that are sprinkled in. And then on top of that, there are some that are saying, well, we're not providing that same service. So this is our rate. If you want to send your kids here, this is just what we charge.
No, are we like kind of to go off of that? Do we have contractual like obligations to the services that we're using now? Or is it just we're using these because that's what there is? Like there's no other option?
It's a supply and demand issue currently.
Okay.
We have plenty of kids and there's not a lot of place for them to go.
I do believe that we are at an advantage because this is prior to me starting, even before I was special ed supervisor, we had started ABA programming here. And I feel like we have district consultants out of Connecticut we work with, and we do have the means to do it if we had the staff. It's not perfect. It's harder to work in a public school. We have to follow, state laws and stuff. But I mean, if anyone's going to have a chance, I feel like it might be us. So.
Member Gallant?
Do you think that if the public knew, I mean, when you go to city, the public knew exactly these numbers, exactly what's going on, exactly what we're paying, do you think there would be more cooperation or more insight for people to have, saying, okay, we want to bring our people, our folks, our kids back, and this is what it's going to cost? I mean, as a taxpayer, I could see the value in someone explaining it to me the way this is what we're paying right now to send them out. Yes, it's going to cost more money, but in the end, we're going to have them back here. We're not going to pay these exorbitant prices.
We've been saying it publicly for years. I don't know that it's easy to understand the how big it is unless you're sitting here looking at these exact numbers.
I do feel like right now, just with talking to others in my role in other districts, that it's harder on them right now. So I think there's going to be more awareness. I don't know if you want to speak, Jake.
Got this bad habit of making noise at the different levels. I have beat every drum that I can on this one. We do have a meeting. I don't know if it's next week or the week after. I have to look.
Next week.
It's coming up pretty quickly, the 19th, where we are supposed to be able to share more and more of these concerns and have them look at things, so that people can realize that this model that was supposed to be improved by this process is impossibly unsustainable. And don't forget, we have 100+ that we serve in-house, and we have 60 on a waiting list.
Well, and if you look at my overall budget, half of my budget is for these 133, and they need that, they deserve this, but I also have 1,000 other students that need to be served here. So.
Member Bowden?
I just, to member Galant, one of the things as a school committee rep that you can do is talk to anybody and everybody that you can about it in your district. And that's something that I've really tried to do over the last couple of years, especially at budget season, when the budget comes up and people start complaining about taxes and budget increase with the school department. My first conversation is about our special ed department and what we need to do legally and ethically to make sure that our students are being served. And it's one of our responsibilities. So absolutely a conversation to have with the public anytime you can, for sure.
That's all I have. Another Tom.
So I do think it's worth a bit of a summary before I bring potential reductions back to you for consideration. And that will be soon, but a big portion of the increase in Article 3 is tuition and seed money. We also have increases in transportation costs. And then you get beyond that, and the other biggest increase in Article 2 is trying to secure the positions to appropriately provide those services in-house. So those are the biggest ask. Everything else is similar to other things where we have, contractual obligations and salary increases, things of that nature. Trying to go back to my other slide here.
Is that it for me?
No way, there's got to be more questions for you.
No.
Member McLaughlin?
I mean, just to share a bit of an opinion, I think related to what Member Bowden and Member Glant were saying, I think if the case can be not only that, okay, we just have to spend a bunch more money over the next year or two, but we're going to make this investment so that over the next 10 years, we're providing a better service and we're saving money in the long term. That seems like not only a convincing argument, based on what has been presented and just learning so far over the last couple of months, I don't see what the alternative even is, right? I mean, this obviously isn't financially sustainable to keep using these special purpose private schools. And maybe there is some legislative work to do to improve it in the interim, but I imagine that we got to this point because maybe they had their own sustainability concerns. I don't want to imagine why we ended up in this, but that would be my assumption, is that they were making a case to the legislature that they weren't able to continue on with the way things were. So it seems like this is not just the best, but maybe the only practical solution is how it's coming across to me.
Oops, I could support that if we could find a way to pay it. And I think that's the hard part. Just a couple of little pieces of information. When this initially started, yes, it was because there were some special purpose private schools whose kids' attendance was really poor for whatever reason, and you could only bill for the days that kids were in attendance. And so when the idea came that we would have to pay every day, it was a shock here because we were budgeting our anticipated attendance. So that was a big shock. And then when part of it being paid every day, the idea behind this cap, which was what was kind of commonly talked about, and which felt like misinformation to an extent, was that if you're paying every day, we're not going to let people just jack up their prices. Well, then we got all these letters. And as you look at your chart, you can see the percentage decrease year to date to the very side of your handout. And you can see those cost increases. Remember, Galant said 116%. Everywhere from we don't use them anymore low to, as low as 5 to as high as 116%.
I think too, the ones that are billing section 28 is massive. because that is such a huge increase on top of the tuition costs. So that's another part.
But no, I agree with you that if we spelled out the space, the staff needed, and we started to onboard people and got to a point of transition, we could spend less money than we do sending kids out. This will still be a serious cost incurred as a district. But I think our kids are worth it.
All right. Well, thank you.
So I put the Article 2 slide up, but I think we covered all the pieces. Want to make sure. I think that last bullet is really important. It's that legal implication of the services, whether we, if we, none of them saying this committee wants to do so, but if we decided hypothetically, or you decided to reduce the special ed budget by a bunch of positions, we are still on the hook to provide the services to those students. So that it's got to come from somewhere. The next section we have is Article 6, which is system administration. And with that, we have, again, contractual increases, insurance costs. And just as a note, if you recall in Article 6, that includes human resources, our business office, my office, which is not just me, but Office of the Superintendent, you all and your massive gas money to get to here and go home multiple times a week. And also there's some clerical staff in there. So just for the public, I made a little joke that the school committee does not see any kind of windfall from the hundreds of hours they put in. But those are the items in Article 6. I didn't have a big presentation around that, but again, as we come back to review, if you have thoughts, concerns, or questions around there, let me know. I will say one of my primary objectives of the many when I was afforded the opportunity to become superintendent was to take the things that I had learned as a principal and as a teacher in our district and figure out ways to make it better for everyone. And there's two key things on this slide that are critically important to me in the work that we do. And it's human resources in our business office. The fact that we can provide the level of service and human resources that we should to a very large staff, and the idea that we can keep our financial affairs in order is critically important to an organization our size. And so Adam and Susanna are out here in the crowd. I just want to throw kudos to them. But if those two pieces are not functioning well, we are not functioning well. So I think it's important to know that they're doing great work. They're training their staff. We're getting better every day, but it takes a concerted effort. I think of things like I saw in the paper or in the media last year around Portland and how, hopefully I'm not quoted, but essentially the wheels came off. People weren't getting their pay. Their benefits were wrong. People didn't get checks, and it was ongoing with discrepancies for months. And it just can't happen. People will absolutely leave you in your organization if those things are happening. So kudos to you all, and thank you very much for the good work that you do. Article 7 is school administration. So this is your
It's not on our list.
oh, is that for another night? Let me come back to it. I could touch on that again later, but just so I'm not leaving you hanging, I know you're just looking for the information. Those are only contractual increases and insurance. There was no other adds or changes there. Article 8 is student transportation, and I'm going to jump to our bright spot slides. And coming up, we have Director Roman, who Alyssa is a lot of things to Lewiston Public Schools, nutrition, transportation, full of wisdom, national liaison. She's a lot of things. So we're very pleased to have her. And one thing that may not have gone as smoothly as everybody wanted it to go was using our new software to create the bus routes. But if that didn't happen, we'd be canceling 15 rides a day. And we would have higher fuel bills and disorganization. So to go to software and to take on that struggle of moving to a more informed system, we're not as good as UPS where we only take right-hand turns at, red lights, but this software does consider those kinds of factors. So it's helpful. So listen, I'm going to swap presentations so you can jump in.
And I was a little bit of a rebel. I did put some sweet, bright spots about nutrition. And if you're looking through your budget book going, where is nutrition? We are 92% funded by the federal government. The other 8% comes from the state of Maine. It does not mean I pay for all the lights in the buildings we work for or work in, but there are some things up here. So I definitely wanted to highlight them. But I have a feeling, this eerie suspicion, that I'll be back later to do a bigger nutrition one in more depth when you guys have more time and not are in this really intense budget period. So I did put some up here for nutrition and transportation, just a brief overview. Yes, I am the Director of Nutrition and Transportation. I do have a vacant Assistant Director for Nutrition at the moment. I have a Assistant Director of Transportation, Kayla, and I have an Administrative Assistant for Nutrition as well. On the nutrition side, we have 75 employees. We have 5 elementary managers, a middle school manager, a high school manager, an assistant manager at the high school as well. We are the largest serving high school in the state of Maine. We are constantly hitting over 1,000 lunches a day. And our breakfasts are pretty darn high as well. Food service workers, we do have 8 cooks, 48 full-time workers, 6 aides, 5 subs. And during the summer, because we're year-round, we do 14 workers and 18 sites in the city, which far exceeds what we have for buildings. Transportation, we are contracted through Hudson Bus Lines. That contract runs out June 30th of 2026. I highlight that for you because to have a very good contracts go out where we get some good returns on our request for proposal, we've been talking about going out at the 25 year. So we want to go out a year earlier. It takes a while to get the fleet we would need, and we want to make sure we have competitive bidding process. So what we have currently with Hudson Bus Lines, they have a terminal manager and a dispatcher. They did drop their assistant manager last year. We do have a radio over at Dingley. We're actively on it every single day, morning and night. We're like the alternative dispatcher ourselves. I'm really glad we're not doing roof construction anymore. I have better signal. Right now there are 47 full-size bus drivers, 33 van drivers, 2 mechanics, 14 aides, and many open positions. We could keep them going. We also are using a couple other sources like Ride Source. Everdriven is one that we just brought on board. If they have fingerprinting and background check and they have a vehicle with the proper insurance and they want to drive one of our kids, we're happy to do it. Many of our homeless students are also being driven by other districts, very much like special education. If a student identifies as Lewiston as being homeless, we are on the hook for half of their transportation, no matter in the state where they're traveling from. So we are traveling up to Mexico, Brunswick, Portland, South Portland, Kittery, York, you name it, we're transporting daily. I don't know if I control the slides or you do.
Well, I've hit the button 3 times, but hold on.
All right,
There
sweet.
you go.
I just had transportation and really what you're seeing is a very small, our new software that we got, although it's hard to roll it out to a general public next year, I have no anticipation of doing anything like we did this year. We kind of ripped off that Band-Aid real hard on routes. So the routes that the students are driving on or riding on at the moment, they're going to stay the same next year. We're not going to do any massive overhaul of the city. What we were able to do with the last system was we were able to geocode latitude and longitude every single student in the district, their alternative addresses, their moms, their dads, LRTC, you name it. I know where they live. I know where they go, and then we make our routes based on that. We were able to pool a bunch of stops, so we hopefully aren't stopping every 3 feet on Main Street, but sometimes life happens. If a student has a disability that requires us to stop, we're going to stop. I just gave you kind of an overview of some of the routes. These are AM and PM combined, but we are doing almost 400 routes daily, and 201 bus routes. That's to and from the schools daily. And if you notice halfway down, we have special transportation, McKinney, Vento students. Those are our homeless students, at-risk students. And so between our specialized students that need specialized transportation based on their IEPs and our homeless students that reside outside our district, we're transporting around 372 of those students daily on buses and vans. Some of those do need individualized rides. Some of them need midday rides, afternoon, you name it, we're doing it. After school routes, we have 11 right now. I probably could do more. The more that we have, the more we want to transport. And kind of at the bottom, I did go into our software just to see how many students are utilizing rides. So we have 3,213 students on AM and a little 3,281 on PM. And then again, that 372 for alternate transportation. When I looked though, we do have our non-eligible zone. That's in our school board or school policy that states what section of the town. It's a mile and a half. When you really look into it, all the elementary kids were pretty much busing. High school and middle school has that walking zone, and that can equal about 600 kids for the high school and about 200 or 150 to 200 kids at the middle school. Again, if they have a medical need or something going on, we can put them on even without an IEP. We follow the policy as written. So if somebody calls up and they have a broken leg, guess what we're doing? We're picking you up. Some of the ones that we struggle with is people want stops right in front of their house. And so they do struggle with if they don't see the stop right there and they have to walk a little bit down the road. That's hard. We do safety stops, meaning that we're going to look not only on Google Maps, we're going to drive out there. We'll reach out to our bus company and ask them what they're able to do as far as get into those areas. And sometimes that means those students need to be on a van to be successful. So all of that is a lot. This changes daily. I would say we have about 38 to 40 students that change every single day that we have to put on rides, as well as moving between schools based on them moving in the city or their IEP changing and needing to go to another facility in the city. So even though they're assigned to Connors, we might bus them to McMahon or vice versa. So all of this is considered. As far as in-district transfers, we're also doing those that Jake approves over on his end. So if there's a reason, we'll also be looking at those as well to see if they're viable and need transportation. We have a question.
Thank you. The after school routes, is that mostly 21st century?
We have 21st century, and then we also have, and that's based on funding. They're paying for that through
That
their
was my next
21st century
question.
grant. We also have our extended school day that is paid for through the Montello one. And then based on what comes on board, depending on what they have for funding, what's approved through budget, then we put that into place as well. So some of the grants come with funding for transportation, and then we help schedule it.
Does that also include high school, middle school sports?
Sports is
Mhm.
through our athletic director. He schedules all of those trips with the various bus outfitters, whether it's Hudson, Northeast Charter, whatever he has, or independent vans. And then, so we're in general not doing those per se. And this also does not include all our field trips that we're also doing, depending on where everyone's going. We kind of have this process where we go through, we look if they're traveling in the city nearby. We do get 170 free field trips in the city. So as those bills are being generated for field trips, we are taking those off and making sure we're not paying for that. But that's only within Lewiston, Auburn. So once they go beyond that, then that changes. And really, we run into some scheduling conflicts, meaning that it takes us until about 9 a.m. to fully bus everyone. And then we have our midday runs that we do for pre-K to get them home and to school at midday. And then we start again at 1:30 doing the full fleet again. And then that ends around 6 p.m. for after school busing, or 6:30, depending on the day.
So just so I'm understanding correctly, the sports comes out of the athletic department budget line. It doesn't
Yes.
come out of the transportation budget line.
Correct. So, yeah, athletics has its own budget. One other piece too, while we have 21st Century and other grants that help fund transportation, we do have a local responsibility. It's like a matching number. I don't have the number exactly off the top of my head, but we are responsible for a percentage locally, and then they pay the rest. It's definitely a good deal for us from a budgetary perspective, but there is a local cost for the transportation that Alyssa's talking about.
Yeah.
Member Eames?
Hi, thanks. I'm wondering if I'm reading this correctly, the increase is only 1.1%, and I'm wondering how that miracle was pulled off.
Yeah, so I dived really deep into our budget. So actually the very first line, alternative transportation, I was able to greatly reduce that. And part of that is from our summer. So we do have money in there in case we need to take into the local part the summer transportation, or if we have other grants available. And so we took a hard look at that. So that was like a big hit to go down that 49% there. The other one is pre-K. We now have our pre-K in the morning. They ride in with their siblings, which has been really nice. Some do ride. Obviously, they don't have a sibling. They're the first on the bus. We keep them in the front of the bus. And so we're only paying for the midday run. We used to pay for a bus in the morning, a bus in the afternoon, and 2 buses in the daytime. So that saved us quite a bit of money. I did up gently the regular transportation based on that, and including the 4% increase from our contract. And I do want to point out that all of this budgeting that I did do does not take away the fact of I am fully aware of the call outs and the disruptions we've had for transportation. So I do ask politely, I mean, we're looking at this from a budgeting, we're budgeting for what we're asking for. We're budgeting for following our policies, having all of our students taken care of and nobody being called off. So it's really hard for me when we have those calls in the morning because that's not what's reflected here. We're budgeting, we're asking for all of that. The other piece for the budget that changed a little bit, we did add in some gasoline. We separated that out. It used to be absorbed into the regular transportation and a couple other places. So we actually have a separate line. I took those out appropriately from those lines. What was the other one that I wanted to point out? And we also put in there some parts for repairs for our minivan fleet that we had gotten during COVID. Those vehicles are still fairly new, but as they need windshield wipers and things like that, we wanted to make sure to build that in. But overall, really the changes as I looked at that alternative transportation summer line, I was like, that is way too high for what we're doing. And so that made a really big impact. And I was able to add in the other ones. The other one that went down a little bit is the special education in-district in-house programming. It does not mean that those numbers changed at all. What it means is that some of those students are able to ride the big buses. And so we didn't have to have individual rides for them. It doesn't mean that it won't change in future years as our new students come in. So some of that, just like what Kirsten was talking about, is really dependent on the student base and who's coming into our community and what their needs are. And then we make those adjustments appropriately. On the other end, out of district transportation for special ed students, that did go up significantly. When I'm looking at those costs, it is a legal obligation. Some of those students are both homeless and specialized, and so they are doubly important. Both are important, so we want to make sure we're meeting those obligations as well.
Member Harriman?
Thank you. I just had a question about the fuel. I assume that the fuel for the vehicles that Hudson owns goes through them and it's part of our contract, or is that a separate cost?
Yep. So in our contract with Hudson Bus Lines, none of the fuel is paid for by them. It is all paid for by LPS. So they actually have fuel fobs. They run them through. I actually got into the nitty gritty and I said, cool. So when you run for Bates, what does that look like? Because if you already have gas from the LPS pumps. So I've already sorted and went into that minutia to make sure they weren't using our fuel for doing contracts for weddings or whatever else is happening in the city. And I was very pleased with that. And they actually, we have our tax break on our pumps in the city. And so the 1 year, this is before my time, that they did use our pumps and tried to do a charging thing, they ended up having to pay taxes and they didn't like that. So they used their card. There's a couple pumps in the city that are accessible. One's in Auburn. Actually, there's one in Turner. So I was very happy with that. But yes, we are paying the city rates for fuel. So we get a monthly fuel bill and we go through it and make sure it lines up. And then Hudson actually has a chart on their wall of when they fueled up. So that way I can go back and audit them and make sure it's legitimate.
Okay, I was just wondering if there was any potential savings by going through the city, but we're already doing that.
Yes, there are also, Jake had signed some paperwork for us to be in some grants for potential electric school buses. I've heard pros and cons about both sides because I know the whole fleet was grounded in the state of Maine recently because of some issues, but we have put our name in numerous times for those grants to look into that. If we were to receive one, we'd have to obviously look at how that would work because we are paying for fuel. Would that mean we're paying for electric? We don't know the answers yet. So once we find out if we got that grant, we'll be able to know more, but we've applied for at least 3 years that I'm aware of. And we've just not, they were always told we're on the list, but they haven't chosen us yet. And right now the cost to contract for an electric bus is still cost prohibitive, much higher than the prices we're currently paying. So when we do go out for our request for proposal, I see us going both ways just to see what we get so that we have some options as well.
Thank you.
Yeah.
This is probably a much bigger conversation, so if it is, you can just give me the short version, but have you done any cost comparisons with what it costs us in a school year to contract with Hudson versus what, say, Auburn or Portland pays to have their own buses?
So the hard part there is that we do not have a facility that would correctly lift up 3 to 4 buses. Our curb at the high school, while beautiful and granite, has knocked out at least 6 tires on a school bus. And I asked them, I said, how much is that tire? It's like $600 a tire. We don't pay for that. We just pay them the daily rate. So we would have to build ourselves an infrastructure to support if we were to do our own busing. So it's hard for us to do some cost comparison because there is the hourly rate, there's the benefits, there's all the moving pieces. They're leasing their buses right now. We could do something similar, but then you have to fill out bus purchasing plan with the state of Maine and get approved for it prior to that. So it would take us a gear up period to be like, what's our facility? How much is it going to cost for all the infrastructure? Plus then I know we've looked at, I mean, this is around a $5 million budget. I think we were talking to even bus all the kids and then add some, you're probably going to double that in the first year just to get us up to going. Now the cost would probably go down in subsequent years because we'd already have a facility, but it is things to think about that we don't have diesel mechanics. We do not have regular ones. And when I hear that a vehicle's bat wing, which is the front piece that goes out, they give it a nickname, but when that goes down, I'm very grateful I don't have to pay for all of that on a daily basis. So I know those costs are factored in, and that makes it really hard. We also have one of the largest fleets in the state. Portland's using city transportation. We've looked into the viability of it and the pros and cons. And we're still willing to look into that. I have no problem looking into any means of transportation at this point, but it is something to look at that we are operating on a daily basis, over 100 vehicles in the morning and the afternoon. It would be a very substantial cost to gear us up for that. I did throw in some nutrition stuff. These are just going to be overviews. We're going to go into more of this. I just wanted to point out on nutrition, even though we have a lot of grant money coming in for local foods. I have our fresh fruit and vegetable grant up there, our USDA food that we get, Department of Defense money that we use for the produce. I do speak with some sergeant down in Massachusetts to literally order apples, but they gave us $125,000, so I will take it. Local Foods Fund, we got $22,000. It has been spent on liquid milk in the course of a month and a half. Just so you know, we use a lot of liquid milk. Supply chain disruption money, kind of like COVID funds, we got $111,000. Again, went to local foods. Can't go to labor, can't go to paper supplies, cannot go to equipment. So all of that went right into food. And then because we're just awesome, we have local funds from the state. If I watch a video that has my face on it, I get an extra $500 for $5,500. So we are utilizing all that money. And up in that right-handed corner, I'd be remiss to not show off our farm to school winners for 2 years in a row. They are going to be going for a 3rd round. She's a little nervous. It's local tofu and chicken this year. I'm hoping we can convince them to make us some samples to show you when we come again. And these are just, it's like a little bit of political charts for you guys. But really what I wanted to point out, nutrition is not just a small program. We have breakfast, lunch, at-risk supper programs, pre-K programs, summer food program, harvest of the month, local food fund, fresh fruit and veggie grant, and community eligibility provision. All of these require separate paperwork, documents, and auditing by the federal government. But the fun numbers are how many breakfasts we did for summer, which is a little under 12,000. And a little over 15,000 lunches. And I did break down by the sites. We do partner with things like Tree Street and our Lewiston Housing Authority, and I love doing that. And I did put some numbers up there. And then our supper meals, we used to just give them a snack of goldfish and like a drink, and now we give them a meal. And so I'm really pumped to see how many meals. I think it says over 16,000 suppers we're doing, and Tree Street's been a huge partner in that, and that money goes back into our programs to sponsor our staff. And then this is always fun. This is year to date breakfast. 255,000 breakfasts have gone out of our facilities. The breakdown of schools are listed there. If I could get more kids to eat breakfast, that's great. It's all about timing. When those buses show up, I kind of help myself with the buses, but when they show up and our contract times start. And then our lunch is 367,000 lunches. That's through the end of February. Again, high school is a huge group in that. This does not include a la carte sales. This does not include adults. And then I do have some pretty pictures of some noodle bowls. If you haven't eaten lunch in a while, that I like it when I can get my hands on some lunch. It's amazing. So we have some noodle bowls that we've tried. They do still make cinnamon rolls if you like them. They are whole grain. So if you like those, it's a little different. We have some parfaits up there as well. Question.
That's not really a question. It's more of a comment that there's a lot of days. Oh, I make a lunch for my girls every day. They're at the high school and there's a lot of days where I pull their lunchbox back out to clean it out and they didn't eat anything. It's still full. And I'll be like, well, what are you doing? And they're like, well, lunch today was this. It was really good.
It is really good.
Yeah. So I just want to like speak to, I'm sitting here hungry. So I'm looking at that going, that looks really good. So now I get why my kids want to eat at the high school.
We have a lot of kids that will supplement their meals with meals from home. I met with a student group just this past week. It was amazing. I love hearing from them when they hear things, taking them on tours. It's amazing. I did include some pictures here. I'm part of the School Nutrition Association. And so with that has been really great. I was just at a conference in Washington, D.C. last week. I got pulled aside by the USDA to meet with them independently from the Undersecretary of the USDA about our culturally diverse foods. We're looking to bring more halal and culturally diverse foods into our systems and to support all students. So part of that in collaboration, the Maine Marinara Collaborative, we got in 93 cases of marinara sitting over at Montello. It is fresh produce. Somali Bantu Biopic farms that have gotten their produce in the summer have sent it to a facility where it was frozen and then made into the marinara and sent back to us. It's also in Good Shepherd Food Bank. And then we have a local greens grant that's coming out next year that we're going to be part of. Scratch Works. I'm part of a collaborative to move foods to school scratch cooking. So that means looking at our velocity reports. That's how much we buy of things and saying, what could we make instead of buy? And so we're already in that. I'm in year 2. It will be in Minneapolis this year. And that's kind of our sister schools as far as having a lot of students. So Bertrand Weber has been a really great mentor of working with him. Chef Ann Grant, Get Schools Cooking, was again about scratch cooking. They're going to do a full assessment of the nutrition program, and that's going to start coming up this year. They're going to actually come out to Lewiston Public Schools and observe our program and give suggestions on improvement or things that we could change to get more scratch cooking in the schools. So I'm really pumped about seeing what we can do there. And obviously I just threw some pictures up to really speak to, we still pulled off, we didn't do 40-foot sandwich at Connors. I think we had to do like 100 feet to get all the kids fed, but we did a giant sandwich last year in honor of Martell. So the Connors kids got to have that. And obviously we meet with all of our senators and representatives with other nutrition directors when we go to DC. They're the ones that make the laws, Congress. So we ask them for funding. That's a lot of what we do. So some good pictures there.
Can you share some of the culturally appropriate foods that you have added? And is that daily or is it just at certain times?
So one of the things that I have to admit I struggle with, I have no interest in making one meal that is big and splashy and we have someone come in from the press and take a pretty picture and that kid ate one day. I'm interested in feeding them 175 school days. And so, or during the summer and everything else. So some of the things we do, I mean, we're going into Ramadan, Ramadan's starting. And so making sure we have the availability for kids to take their food. They still have to take their food at service because of the laws from the USDA, but allowing them to take it so when the sun goes down, they can consume those meals. So we're making some changes there as far as just protocol and logistics. On the other end, I know I'm looking at food that fits the criteria of being either kosher or halal, making sure it's with the Islamic guidelines that there are. The USDA, when they met with me, they're looking to source that food that we get from the government. They're looking to source that. So I know I actually have a meeting with 5 Pillars actually coming up again. They do butchery, halal butchery. And really, we're going to do a lot of education on everyone can eat halal. It's no different than if you ate yogurt and it's kosher. It's still yogurt that everyone would eat. So we're going to have to do some education for people to understand that this is not changing ingredients. If anything, it's taking preservatives out, which is not a bad thing per se. So we're going to look a lot into that and then have some taste tests with students, because even though it looks healthy and everyone says it's great, if the kids won't eat it, I don't want to feed the trash can. So we're going to have some local chicken come in. We already have some that we've done. We've also had some local fish come in. And that means partnering with our Gulf of Maine, where all our students went. I went down to South Portland and watched some school appropriate fish recipes, and I walked over to the garbage to see what South Portland threw away. And so based on that, we're going to have some chefs come in and do some of those local fish. There is free fish down in Portland. If I hop in my car and can drive down on a Thursday, we'll get some local fish for our schools. But regardless, we have money from our local foods. So Connors, when they put fish on the menu, I'm like, we're not going to sell it. 400 pieces out the door out of 600 kids that ate that day. So that says to me there is a desire for some of these items. It is not fish sticks of old. This is not 1970s food service. So watching that happen, curries, chicken curries, marinaras, different seasoning, enchiladas, different cuisines, we're doing that and then changing it up. So I'm really happy. And then salads, I'm watching sides, I'm watching seasonings go in. It's not just open a can and then hope it goes. So we have a really caring team of staff that do it. They're tasting. My own staff eat the food as well. So it's good to see all the different things we're doing. Local pizza crust we have in there as well. There's a new one called the Good Crust. It's a sourdough crust. Actually, they were sampling it there in that picture. And so it's like more brick oven. And that also means using some LCIP money to get the right equipment at the high school so we can have this stuff fresh and out there, not in a warmer.
So no more square pizza or rectangle pizza?
That has been asked by, I think everyone in the accounting office was like, can I have my square pizza back from the 80s? I still have the recipe. I have some really winners of recipes. I've saved everything. We used to have our own bakers in our district. I've saved every recipe and I can convert a lot of them into child nutrition appropriate. We also had new software, not only transportation had new software, but also nutrition. So what you're missing right now is we have an online software platform that's soon to be unveiled. It's actually live. I haven't put the website up yet, but you'll be able to click on your child's menu live. If they change out broccoli for romaine lettuce, you'll see that change live. And then all the nutrients are attached to it. They also have pictures of the food. So as we make the food, I'm taking live pictures to put in so you don't have stock photos for everything. But that's going to be really nice to put out there so parents can see as well as the students can see what's for lunch. So that's going to be unveiled in the spring here. I was like a week away from getting it out. And it also has some menu translation. I just need to make sure it translates to all our languages. So we have some really cool things coming out. And then Full Plates, Full Potential has a grant that USDA gave them for just the state of Maine for $10 million. So we're going to work with Lisbon, Auburn, Oxford. We're going to meet to see if we can come up with some worthy grant stuff so we can get some of that money in local foods again.
Member Bowden?
I just want to say, wow. And wow, because the transportation piece of it alone, I would think is a full-time job and a giant headache. And so the fact that you are able to do both, and you bring so much knowledge and like excitement to it as well. I really enjoyed this presentation and I don't know how you do both of these jobs in a 40-hour work week. I'm assuming it's not even, it's more than a 40
It's
hour.
not, well, I have to admit, when I got up in DC to introduce myself, I got a standing applause from the Northeast region and there was a shout of you should take a vacation.
Yeah, I believe that.
But I think it's because there's a passion and I honestly have found the logistics. The more kids I can bus to Tree Street, the more kids I can feed for after school meals. So the programs feed each other. And the more pre-K kids I can get to come to school on a bus, the more kids are going to have nutrition early on. And so I think the conversations I've had with Karen or Jake have been, how can we expand the educational piece to get kids more involved in school and what they're eating? And I know our wellness committee, as we're getting that on board, is going to be huge as well.
I just wanted to say though, you're a star and I'm so thankful you're in our district. So thank you for all you're doing.
Thanks.
Yes.
Member Hurd?
So yes, I want to echo what Member Bowden said, because it is amazing and phenomenal. And I probably speak for a lot of parents at home that we are very thankful for your knowledge and food program, because at this time in the year, I have no idea what to pack my kid for cold lunch. And so when you make really great meals, I don't even have to worry about it. It's just a snack. And so it's really easy.
Thank you.
It's the sheer size of the machine. And when you're moving kids to and from and making sure they have food, that's a big ask. So Alyssa, thank you very much. Next up, we have Director of Facilities, Josh Bro. Speaking of how big the machine is, so Josh will touch on this as he works the presentation, but we are a massive set of facilities. So when we have all of our different structures that require everything from sump pump underneath a set of stairs in the high school after construction for an unanticipated water issue to the roof at McMahon. That is a never-ending source of Tylenol and Advil for Josh. But those projects are all happening and working and coming together. So turn it over to you, Josh.
Thank you very much. And this look in my face is having to follow that presentation. I'm going to ask that I not follow Alyssa anymore because it gets tougher and tougher every year. Am I running this or do you? Can do. All right. So as stated, I am Josh Bro, the facilities director. My staff is primarily made up of, well, it's exclusively made up of all the people that I put in the slide. Ray Roy is our facility supervisor. He's in charge of making sure all of our custodians have what they need and our schools are being taken care of and cleaned and sanitized appropriately every night after all the students and staff are gone. And sometimes we're working while they're still there. And Rebecca Giroux is the master behind the scenes that makes me look good every day. I don't know how she does it, but I'm still here and it's exclusively probably because of her. As far as our staff, we have our maintenance team is what I call it. We have one district electrician who's a licensed master electrician who takes care of any and all electrical needs, any projects where, oh, we need an outlet there or move this here or move that there. Our electrician is on top of that. As far as other people in the maintenance team, we have our maintenance staff, which is 3 maintenance technicians who work around the district in our schools, around our schools, on top of our schools, under our schools, you name it. We've been there. We also have a driver who also floats into facilities for us when he's not doing driving duties, but he's doing all the food deliveries, moving any information packets for students between schools, out of schools, you name it, he's moving it. And then we have a sundry custodian who is our primary backup for a head custodian, although we haven't really had that position filled consistently, but right now they're basically filling in full-time at Montello while we look for a new head custodian at that school. Our custodial team is made up of our 8 head custodians at each of our 8 buildings, as well as 42 custodians. You can take me to the next one, please, and thank you. These first 2 bullets are something that I took from a conference I went to a couple of years ago where generally speaking across the nation, facilities directors do not toot our own horn about what we do and how we do it. This is a chance to do that. They highly recommended that we push that kind of information out there. So going on the calendar year, the start of the current calendar or fiscal year that we're in, sorry, not calendar year, but fiscal year, since July 1st of last year through March 1st of this year, we've completed 2,163 tasks requested by LPS staff across the district. That doesn't include the thing that I call a hallway mugging, which sounds way worse than it is. But that's where somebody from maintenance or custodial is walking through a hallway and a teacher happens to grab them and say, oh, by the way, can you come fix this for me real quick? We typically like to have those things in Incident IQ, which is where we track all of those requests. So we can keep tabs on who's doing what, how quick things are going, what the typical lead time is before we show up on site, and then how long it takes to actually get it fixed. Next one is custodians. On average, each custodian cleans about 24,500 square feet per day, which is the equivalent of 12 houses. So if you look at what it takes you to clean your house and then do that 12 times, that's 1 day for our custodian. Or our custodians, I should say. So it's a pretty massive effort with what we do and what we have to do it with. And then a couple of other bright spots. At Lewiston Middle School, we have replaced the auditorium air handler, and we've installed a new ventilation system for the gym, which also provides heating and cooling. The unit that provided the heating and cooling and ventilation air for the auditorium was getting very old, was breaking down continually, not running very efficient. Now we have the best and brightest up on there, and you'll actually see a picture of that in a second. And then we also added some ventilation systems that came with heating and cooling for the gymnasium, which had a very passive ventilation style system that did not do very well to keep that space ventilated. It was also very hard to keep warm, and we didn't keep it cold because we didn't have air conditioning. We now do. So that's really cool. We're also just now starting to scratch the surface of a very large project. There's been a lot of work getting us to this point, but we have boots on the ground finally over at the high school, where we are in the process of replacing the 3 primary air handlers that provide ventilation air to pretty much the entire building, first and second floor. We're also changing some air handlers that provide ventilation down in the basement. But one of the biggest things that we're going to do, and gentleman that just walked in over my left shoulder, principal for the high school, will attest, in the middle of the winter, you can walk around that school. If you look outside, you'll see probably a third of the windows are open, because our heating control system is so antiquated that it just constantly sends heat to the classroom. It gets up to 80 degrees. Kids start falling asleep. The only answer is to pop a window open to let some of that heat out, get some cool air in, and keep those kids awake. This is going to address that across the building entirely. So that's going to be huge next year when we get to heating season. We'll have rooms that are 70 to 72 like they're supposed to be, not 80 or in the 80s, putting kids to sleep. So that's pretty much where we're at. If you want to take me to the next slide. Those are the units at the middle school. So what you see on the left is the auditorium unit being flown up to what it then became on the right, which is its final resting location. That is the new unit with new ductwork out on the roof, new controls. Recently just started up, tied into the global control system for the entire district, and is now serving the auditorium. We also built, well, our contractor built a service platform around it so we can adequately service it safely. If you want to take me to the next one, this is something that I've been trying to do since I started 5 years ago, or a little more than 5 years ago. And that is getting our schools to not look so old, which is a big thing to me and to the students. But those pictures there are the high school. You can see the B wing at the high school, which is what the floor used to look like. And the back C wing is what the floor looks like now. We've done both the first and second floor back C wings, specifically because the floor tiles were peeling up, and our indoor track team and spring track team, when it's inclement weather, will run that building nonstop. We had floor tiles pulling out as they were running. It's a slip, trip, fall hazard. So we identified those issues. You can see in the picture to the left, some of the spots where we've replaced floor tiles where they have peeled up. It was very much like that through the whole course of the back C wing.
At one point last year, I think kids were collecting the floor tiles. Like the seniors were like, I'm keeping a floor tile. Like that was a thing. I actually, Karen saying in my ear, actually had students ask me to sign a floor tile that had come up that they were able to grab as like a collector's item. So thank you, Josh, for getting those floors repaired.
Yeah, good question.
No, it's not a question, but I just wanted to let you know that those floors are so beautiful that when I brought our photographer in to do team photos of the girls' basketball team, she walked through the school a little bit and found that hallway and said, I'm doing photos here. And so the team and individual photos were taken in that hallway where those windows are. The natural light was beautiful, and the floors just looked so like aesthetically pleasing and gorgeous in the photos. And I've had lots of other schools ask me, wow, your floors look like that at your school? That looks so cool. How did you think to take your photos there? So I actually saw that. I just wanted to say, I saw it for the first time this year. I don't know when you upgraded that, but oh my gosh, it's beautiful in person. So great job on that.
Thank you for that. We do that in the like 4 days they give us in the summer to get things like this done. Between school, summer school, after school programs, you name it, there's always something going on. So we have to beg, borrow, and then sometimes fight to get things like this done. But usually once they see the final product, it's not too hard to convince them the next time when I say, hey, I want to get this done this summer. They usually, fall right in line and let us do that. Just so you know, one thing I do want to point out. So the picture on the right is what we are trying to do through Lewiston High School. In the budget request for this year is a request for the first floor V-wing to do the exact same thing. We would use the exact same wood finish in the center, but LRTC is green, LHS is blue. So it would be blue trim on the edge. We've already kind of talked about that, doing that. So it'll still delineate LHS from LRTC a little bit, but it'll be similar, but a little bit different. So that's what I have for slides. I'm just going to run through real quick some items tied to my budget. Some of my cost drivers this year are salary and benefits. We are asking for a new position at Connors. There's benefit increase across the board for all of our folks due to their labor agreements. We've added some overtime funds for several accounts or schools, if you will, that historically did not have any. We always have overtime every year, whether we're in late, coming in on weekends for unexpected things, or putting people in our buildings to help run community events, I should say, when people are renting our buildings, which we always promote and love to have people in our buildings. So we've allocated some funds to allow that to happen. Usually just sent the account negative. We never say no to people, well, almost never say no to people who are looking to use our buildings. And then Dingley's salary is up 21% because we've shifted some where positions are funded out of, basically. Utilities, most of our numbers were updated by a percentage of increase recommended by the city. So that's pretty much how we got that. The biggest one was sewer. That was a 25% increase. But we didn't exactly follow the equation exactly. I didn't just take last year's number and multiply it by 9% for water this year or power. We take a historical look going back three years and see what consumption is. That was challenging through COVID because we had a year where we shut down in March, and then the next year we were 50% occupied. So now we're starting to get some better data, and we can better forecast where our utility consumption is going to be. So certain ones that should have had an 8% increase didn't, because basically what we did was we adjusted for historical consumption. Labor force, we're currently fully staffed in our maintenance department. We're down to about a half a dozen custodial positions, and we have several subs on in our team right now, which is not usually where we are. A lot of those subs eventually turn into full-time employees, which is great because we kind of vet them first. They get the feeling of what they're doing, and then they sign on for a full-time job with increased pay rate usually, and benefits as well. We did do something pretty cool this year. We kind of realized that we were not keeping up with cleaning at Connors because it was slightly understaffed, which we're trying to address this year by adding a position, and we could not fill all the positions there. So it was putting a lot of extra stress on the custodians that do work in that building, and there was a lot of overtime, and we had a lot of physical injuries because basically people were wearing themselves out. So Roy, my right-hand man, basically said, let's talk about maybe outsourcing some cleaning, and then let's pick a school that we could put all of our outsourced cleaners at one spot and put all our LPS people in the rest of the spots. And we've been doing that for about a month and a half, 2 months now, and it seems to be working out pretty slick. It filled the holes that we had at other schools, and now we have somebody who's responsible for keeping that building clean, which is working very well so far. A few growing pains here and there is to be expected, but I think the end result is going to be awesome. There is no long-term commitment to that company. So as we hire more and more staff, we will eventually work them out of a job, which they knew when they signed up to do. So it's not a forever solution. It's a we need it now solution. Let me see. One of the big things that we've been hearing and we've been working towards is changing our approach from a reactive philosophy to a proactive philosophy. We're also adding to that, starting this year, some data-driven decision makings. So we're starting to crunch numbers, gather information. One of the things that we did, we just redid the lighting controls programming for McMahon and Geiger. And one of the things that new lighting control system will do is it will tell us immediately if there's any issue with a light bulb or a ballast being out. We can also compare energy usage classroom to classroom, and we can also try different technology in those classrooms and then compare those classrooms against the original lighting to say, this is saving us 30% of our lighting costs, this room compared to this room. And it's a 2-year payback if we do it everywhere. So we'll have actual data, not a salesman pitch on what things will actually pay back. So that's very cool. Bill and I are working on a facility condition assessment with asset tagging, logging and information. So basically we can walk up to any of our devices in our school, scan a QR code, and it'll pull up the service history, all the information that you need for that to run it, operate it, things of that nature. And we're trying to really get some facility related costs based on operating and maintaining a building. Again, with that seminar we went to a couple of weeks ago, to really open my eyes on what the actual cost to operate a building. Like, we put a $10 million expansion, 30,000 square feet over at the high school. It's crazy how much you actually spend on that over the life of it. So we're starting to look at some of those industry standards as far as how many % of your typical or expected replacement value of a building and how much that's supposed to be spent on maintenance, operation, as well as capital improvements, which is like anywhere from 1 to 4%, give or take. So that's pretty much what I have. I'll be happy to take any questions if there are any.
Member Heard?
Thank you. A couple things. So, I was looking at snow removal and I'm assuming that's probably just under like ground maintenance. It's not broken down by each individual school, but do we pay, how does our contract work? Do we pay by the storm? Do we pay one flat fee over the course? Cause like for this year, your plowing company is made out because we didn't have a lot of storms. There wasn't a lot of plowing and shoveling. So what do we have for just like, what's our contract for the district?
Our contract is we pay per person and per device that's on site. So whether it's a loader, a plow, a small little skidder, or not skidder, but a skid steer, those are by the hour. So we get charged exclusively by the hour per storm. So usually what I'll see is 2 weeks worth of plowing information come into me from each of our multiple contractors. But we do bid that out every 3 years, and it is an hourly rate and equipment cost rate exclusively.
And my second question is, so the company that you're using to outsource for Connors, is that equivalent to a team that we would have at Connors? So however many people they have coming in to clean, is that like equivalent to what we would need to staff that building?
Yes, it is.
And the cost for the outsource company, is that more or less than what it would be if we fully staffed that building with LPS employees?
When looking at hourly rate benefits and everything else, I think we're either just saving or just spending a little bit more, but it's almost right where what we forecast if it was LPS people.
Member Bowden?
I just want to say, don't sell yourself short. I know you came after Alyssa. But I want to pay you a compliment as well, because I know how huge facilities is. And our buildings are no small things. So thank you for what you're doing as well. Very appreciated.
Can we do a boardroom mugging instead of a hallway mugging? And while you're here, you can teach one of us how to use this gadget on the wall, because halfway through every one of our meetings, it drops to like 50 degrees in here and we're all freezing and no one knows how to operate it. So if you could teach one of us, that would be great.
I can do that.
That would be wonderful. Thank you.
It's actually strategy, so we're not here all night.
That works. Thank you.
Right, the last area tonight to do an overview is Article 10. I might put Adam on the spot a little bit on this one, but Article 10 is debt service, and what that represents for us this year, which varies from some prior years, is that it's an increase. Let's see here. Not a lot of information there, but essentially we have revenue that comes in from state-approved projects and or from bonds. And so this year we have paid off some things that had revenue attached to it, so we don't get the revenue. And then we have localized debt items that we have the mortgage on that we don't get revenue for. So more of those items remain than revenue coming in for state-approved projects. Is there more detail to that, Adam, that I should share, do you think, as far as it relates to debt service being increased this year?
Good evening, everyone. I'd like to thank Jake for putting me on the spot. I don't have my numbers in front of me, but in general, the way it works is Article 10 is major capital debt service, things like new buildings, major additions to buildings, things like that. Most of the LCIP debt for work done on our existing buildings falls under Article 9, and that's based on how the state tells us where it should go in the budget. And so what we're seeing this year is the debt service in Article 9 is going up, and that's just due to the timing. Every year, new bonds that have been approved come on and old ones fall off. And this year it just happened to be not a lot fell off because of timing, but some significant ones came on. So you'd see the debt piece of Article 9 is up. Article 10, every year, and you'll see this correlating on the revenue side, as Jake said, the annual payments on the three major state-funded school projects, they go down every year. So that article can tend to decrease every year, but you may see a corresponding increase in Article 9, and that's how it played out this year. But you could think of Article 10 as major capital debt. Those are the big new buildings and additions to buildings end up in that article.
Thank you, Adam.
You're very welcome. I'm happy to discuss any questions you may have.
All right, so that's what we had for tonight for overview. And then coming up, we will have Article 3, LRTC, Lewiston Adult Education. I'm going to remove debt service and put in system admin there. And any other areas we have yet to hit. And then with that, Madam Chair, we could perhaps take a little break.
And all of those will be Wednesday at Connors,
Yes, Wednesday Congress.
at Connors.
Yeah.
Do we go into executive session and then take a break, or? Yes, okay. So agenda item number 7 is to enter into executive session to conduct student A disciplinary hearing, Title 20A 10019 and Title 1 4056B. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Member Hurd and Member Bowden. All in favor?